Welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast. F1 content around the
I'm
globe.
going into the season completely open now to just dedicating it to Formula One. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. But so far, we're talking about the previous season.
Yes, 24.
And we left off the last podcast after the Hungarian Grand Prix?
Yes, the very dramatic McLaren Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yes. And now we're going into the very dramatic Belgium Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that dramatic.
Yeah, it's some drama to it, definitely.
I wrote down a few pointers. Leclerc started from pole, Perez from P2, and Hamilton from P3. Norris started a little bit further back.
Yep.
And after he dipped the wheel in the gravel, he lost another 3 places.
Mm-hmm.
So even from pole, he finds it hard to keep positions. And Max Verstappen had to work his way up from P11 because he put the car on pole, but was denied because he took a new engine.
Yep.
Now, question. This is a little bit related. Do you think it's fair that if you take your first new engine, you get 10 grid places penalty, and then when you take your second extra, you only get 5? Should it not be like the first time you get 5, and then the second time you get 10 places to make the punishment a little bit harder?
I don't know, because it's they have to now dip into those extra engines, and most teams, from what I understand, like teams that are customer teams, even McLaren and Aston Martin, who are very close to that of Mercedes, usually do not pick up a fourth engine through the season, so they have to stick with the 3 that they have, or they go over budget into what they wanted to spend in that season. I think that has a lot to do with why it's 10 places, because they ended up going and dipping into that budget that most teams can't do. Like Red Bull can obviously do that, but maybe V-Carb would have more trouble doing it. So I think it's pretty fair with the system. And then if you're going to dip in already with the first one, then screw it. Just put a 5 place on the second one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I was talking more from a regulatory standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do something wrong, like if you get caught drunk driving, then the second time you do it, you lose your license for good. That
Right.
sort of thing.
That's true. That's true. I get where you're coming from that point. I think 10 is pretty fair, as it does give you a slight advantage. When you do end up putting that new engine on, it's better than what most people are running. And I just think if you go for it a second time at that point, that advantage is starting to lessen and lessen as more teams are doing that. So I'm not sure. I'm okay with it, at least the way that it is.
Okay, well, that was a bit of a sidetrack. So Hamilton took the lead in lap 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the race progressed, Perez started to drop down to P8 for
Whatever reason.
Significant reason.
Yeah.
And the 2 Mercedes drivers were having a nice little fight, like they always do, pretty much. Yeah, those were the pointers that I've written down.
Yeah, I mean, like from qualifying, the biggest thing that I got was Leclerc actually had an insane qualifying. I know Max was unstoppable, and this is definitely, in my opinion, his best track, because whenever he's here, he pretty much dunks at least 4 or 5 tenths on everybody. Like, even if the car is strong, he just shows how strong he is here at Spa. But Leclerc was very impressive. I think he dunked like 8 tenths on Sainz, something ridiculous from what I remember. And from the Mercedes boys, what I really thought was very impressive from George, regardless of the disqualification, was the strategy and the boldness that he ended up actually taking to go to the end, because Lewis was in an insane form in this race, and he still ended up keeping Lewis behind. Now, how much you determine that pace differential that he had because of the weight, I forget. Yeah. He was down on weight like a little, barely though.
We need to tell the people at home first that George Russell won the race by doing a 1-stop, and then later got disqualified because his plank was worn too much.
Right, just that slightly to put it under that weight limit that he could have been on.
Yeah. Um, I just loved. I listened to the radios after the race, and during the race, Russell says, "Guys, I want to do a one stop. Let's do a one stop, guys." Right? And then he goes over the finish line and he goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Great strategy, guys."
No, yeah.
It
But
was his own call.
right. But it was a great call by him. It was a great call by him, and something that he's definitely picked up. Both Carlos and him have that very engineer-like mindset, and I think that's part of the reason as to why I have so much belief in those two. And I do believe that Leclerc and Lewis both have that as well, but it's a little bit less than Carlos and George. They both have that similar mindset to that of Sebastian Vettel, who was very much like that, always thinking one step ahead. I feel like Max has that, and he has the driver instinct. So nowadays, these drivers have to be paying attention to every little detail, how much even their teammate is tearing up their tires in comparison to him, what's actually possible, what's doable. It was very impressive by George. I thought that this was his best performance of the year, regardless of the disqualification. It was both perfectly executed by him, and his pace was incredible in the race. To keep Lewis behind on fresher tires, I think that in itself tells you how good of a race it was for him.
Yeah. No, it was pretty impressive. I think if you have a well-built trust with your engineers, then most of the time there's no need to invent your own strategies.
Very true.
And that's why you see Max doing this very little.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Max was so surprised in Hungary that he had to overtake two cars to get back into P3, that he got undercut twice, because that was very unusual. You know, Max trusts on Hannah and GP, so for it to see it go so wrong, you know, and Sainz, Carlos Sainz, is forced to do a lot of strategy for himself because they do so many things wrong. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
So would you say we can conclude Spa for this podcast?
I would say so. Yeah, it was just very controversial with that, obviously disqualification, but the Mercedes cars were very quick, which was they had a floor upgrade that didn't end up working there. They ended up reverting back to the previous floor, so that was always very interesting with them. They were never able to get to grasp that car up until a future upgrade in Austin, but very back and forth with that team, and it just shows that George has that race pace as well with Lewis when the day comes.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to the race where I was present.
Mm-hmm.
Race number 15 was Zandvoort.
Yes.
And my wife and I were there for all 3 of the days, and we made a lovely vlog about it. So for people coming here through F1 Unchained channel, if you're interested in what a weekend experience at the Zandvoort Grand Prix is, go and check out my vlog. It's only 25 minutes long, but it'll show you from where I live to how the trains work to the food that's available, everything. The whole package is there in case you're interested in going there. Okay, so much for the advertisement.
Now it's a lovely 25 minutes. They should check it out.
Norris started on pole and Max P2, and Piastri and Russell on the second row. Now, Max had a great start. Norris had a little less of a start.
A Lando start.
And Max overtook him, but the pace difference was just too great. And I don't know how many laps later, Norris just passed him and dunked, 20 seconds on Max.
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton started way back. Did he have a bad qualifying?
I mean, it was kind of typical in 2024 that Lewis was having bad qualifying. I think he got out in Q2, if I remember correctly.
And Carlos Sainz as well?
Yeah, it was not his greatest race either.
Yeah. And then in lap 40, there was a 5-car fight.
Oh, yeah.
K-Mag, Alonso, Stroll, Gasly, and Albon Yeah, they were all on the same straight, and I think it was K-Mag that was holding everybody up again.
Yeah, he
Uh,
pretty much had dead tires going into that first corner.
And yeah, that was interesting to see on that straight. But overall, it wasn't the best race of the season.
No,
It was,
typically for me, in my opinion, I think Zandvoort produces banger races. Like 23 and 22 were both amazing races, but this year we didn't really have the rain come in. Lando was much quicker than Max. There wasn't really much of a fight, so it was like 3 or 4 laps, I think, that Max kept him back, which was impressive enough considering the car that he had and what Lando had. But Lando was pretty much unstoppable on this weekend. I got to give him props
yeah,
there. He made the most out of the car, and then he dropped his simply lovely line at the end, which definitely got
simply.
Max's head for sure.
No, he talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago, Max.
On the podcast.
Yeah, he said something like that he took it more as a compliment that Norris used his catchphrase
Mm-hmm.
in the Netherlands, and that's the only reason why Norris did it, and not to there was no malicious intent or anything.
Yeah. I didn't think so either. I thought more so like Max heard that and he's like, all right, it's time to turn up the jets if I need to. But of course, Max is always zoned in. But I do believe that it was very cool that he used it over there in Zandvoort, and it was an impressive performance. It was a simply lovely performance, for being honest.
Yeah, it definitely was. What I thought was strange was that Zach Brown used it after winning the constructors.
Oh, did he?
You know,
I didn't even hear that.
he was the third one to say "Simply Lovely" over the radio, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know, like Zach Brown is the guy that slaps people and said, "Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He's very, very American, very animated.
yeah." For a while, I didn't like him, but now the season's over, I like him again.
He's got to be given a lot of props, though. I know that the statement that he made on Max was definitely wrong, but he's not a team principal exactly. He's like the CEO over there. He's done an amazing job. I think
Yeah.
he pretty much revived that team from the dead, and he's gotten them now to the position that they're in. They're the most sponsored car on the grid, which is just insane. If you look at 2018, they had 2 sponsors, 3. The car was pretty much just orange and that slight bit of blue that they had. So a lot of props has to be given to him, but he's definitely got to watch his wording. I feel like sometimes I think he steps a bit over the edge.
Yeah, I think he does it in his enthusiasm. You know, he's seen all these former, all these fights between Horner and Toto Wolff, and he wants to get involved in that as well because he thinks he's a player as well, and yeah, sometimes he tries a little bit too hard.
Agreed.
Because I didn't think it was very classy when Horner was involved in that scandal that him and Toto were putting extra oil on the fire.
I agree.
I didn't think that was very classy.
I agree. Yeah, it wasn't really their place to say much, in my opinion.
So, yeah, but yeah, they probably thought they could get an advantage out of it.
Which sometimes if you look at it in a competitive sport, I guess there is a reason to say something or to get under the skin of somebody, which Zach Brown, Toto loves to do it. Toto loves to do it with everybody, but I give him full props. I think if I was a team principal or a CEO, I would add fuel to the fire as well. Maybe not for the Horner situation, but more so, if Checo says the car is shit, then sure, I'll add on to it. Let's try and heat this up a bit more and see if we can get under the team's skin.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You need to grab every little tiny advantage you can.
Especially in this sport, yeah.
Yeah. So, that concludes Zandvoort.
A very easy race.
Race number 16 was Monza.
Yes.
Norris was on pole. Piastri was in P2. I'm not sure who was in P3 and P4. I think it was the Ferraris. Norris had a good start and kept the lead after turn 1, but Piastri stayed close and pipped him.
Yep.
Russell had a bit of a detour while fighting, so he went over the grass.
Yep.
That put him a bit back. Hulkenberg hit Ricciardo.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
No, sorry. Hulkenberg got hit by Ricciardo,
Yeah. It was going down into.
and Hulk hit Yuki Tsunoda.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Lando took a pit stop, and hey, I think I made a mistake. It wasn't in, or was it in Monza that Piastri grabbed the lead of him?
Yeah, it was. That was
Yeah.
that very controversial, but also not controversial. I think it was turn 4 that he made it around the outside. It was a very impressive overtake, but there was conversation around it because obviously Lando was in a championship fight. The papaya rules thing that was being implemented by that team and so on. I remember thinking in my head it was ambitious, and if I was in Piastri's position, I would do the same thing. But I found it funny that McLaren never really said anything to those two because it would have made much more sense for Lando to take the lead, and then those two would have just strolled off, and we wouldn't have gotten the victory that we ended up getting in Monza that year.
Yeah, no, that's true. And also Lando was a bit shook by it because when Lando was taking his pit stop, he had to step on the brakes really, really hard. Lots of smoke coming up, and he hit one of those pillows, near the track.
Yep.
It looked really sloppy. K-Mac got another penalty for hitting Gasly, and I think that was the one that pushed him over the 12 points.
Yeah, it was a really dumb penalty, though, from what I remember. I think he barely touched him. It was just like a racing incident, and they gave him a penalty point there, but then they gave him nothing in Monaco. So super inconsistent by the FIA. I was not a fan of that decision for sure.
No.
But that getting into that pit lane is very difficult in Monza, being able to get to that pit limiter exactly. Now, obviously, these guys are professionals, but it's still, out of all the pit lanes that we have, you take a lot of speed going into that one. So I think that contributed partially to Lando's big lockup going into that pit lane.
Yeah. What else did I write down? Norris and Piastri did a 2-stop, but Leclerc did a surprising 1-stop.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a theme this season for drivers looking after their tires and doing a 1-stop.
That was a big contributor to why 2024 was so good, because so many of these races, the temperatures were so different to that of last year that the strategies, like in Monza last year, a 1-stop, that was what you were going for no matter what. But this year, there was a debate between that 2-stop and a 1-stop, and there were multiple people on the grid that got hurt by taking a 2-stop over 1-stop, and then the 1-stops actually ended up getting it to the end of the race, which most people didn't predict. I love that factor of Formula One, and that is the good factor about these tires being so sensitive, but it's very particular on what race you can actually have it for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely a very interesting season, and the best thing about it was that every race you couldn't predict who won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because who would have thought Leclerc would have won this one?
No, I definitely didn't. Max was off the pace, and by that time they were really worried that he might lose the championship. That was around Monza. It was pretty much the low point of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But Leclerc scored a victory in Monza, so yeah, the tifosi were very happy. Lots of red smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar P2 and Lando P3, and then there was lots of chatter about team orders and the papaya rules and McLaren making a mistake. I remember Will Buxton on F1 TV doing a 7-minute rant about how those opportunities for Norris to become world champion don't come along very often, and McLaren should do everything in their power to make Lando the world champion. And fair enough, he said it to Zach Brown in his face, and he said it to what do you call the team principal, the Italian?
Italian team principal?
Yeah, the McLaren team principal.
Oh, Andrea Stella.
Andrea Stella.
Yeah.
He stood on their table and he directly confronted him with the strategies, which I thought, was pretty brave, because usually journalists stay on the well, they stay neutral.
Yeah,
But
or they do it in the dark. They'll say their piece without actually
yeah,
confronting. I've grown to like Will Buxton a lot. I think he's actually for the fans and for entertainment in Formula One, and I think he's pretty neutral, regardless of him being British. I think he's very fair, so
yeah,
I'll give him his props.
yeah, and whatever he says it with so much enthusiasm that um, you can't get mad at him.
Mm-hmm.
He does these silly season predictions, and he does about as well as I do. I I got 12 wrong out of 20.
I mean, that's how it is. Everybody pretty much gets those wrong. That's why it's a prediction. But then you'll get people in the comments telling you that, oh, I got it always right though. Yeah, you definitely did. That's why I made a video about it.
So, was there anything else that stood out in Monza?
I mean,
Were there big upgrades for teams?
Ferrari brought their biggest upgrade here, and that's really what changed the car around. I think what really stood out was the tire management that Ferrari had. Leclerc was very impressive. Sainz ended up finishing P4, but still he was lower down, and he ended up getting caught into some dirty air for a longer period of time over Leclerc. But Leclerc's performance here was chef's kiss. It was beautifully done here. I think the biggest talking point for me was definitely that McLaren was just leaving points on the table. Both they did that in Hungary and they did that in Monza. And that's frustrating now looking at the very end of the season because possibly there was something there with how the performance ended up going in Abu Dhabi for Max not having the fastest car. Looking at it in hindsight right now, obviously there's definitely reason as to why McLaren should have pushed for it. And I think Will Buxton was completely correct in saying that these types of opportunities don't come along very often. I think they're going to regret it somewhat, but they won the constructors, so I guess they can be prideful of something. But everybody looks at the drivers in particular, I would say,
Yeah,
much more than the constructors.
yeah. Ideally, you win both. You have
Of
such a
course,
good
yeah.
car that you tackle both.
Right.
But yeah. Um, I think that the psychology of drivers plays a big part in this as well, and they want Piastri to become as good as Norris,
Mm-hmm.
and by holding him back or making him a second driver, um, that would mentally it would be a big hit for him mentally, and they just don't want to do this.
Of course.
And but yeah, I'm I'm not a big fan of having two almost equal drivers. And we're going to see that next season when Leclerc and Hamilton keep taking points off each other.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And well, Russell probably has his hands free, and Max has his hands free.
Mm-hmm.
And then at McLaren, though, those two will be fighting hard as well,
Yeah,
especially after this season.
I think so as well. Let's see this improvement by Piastri. Hey, maybe Lawson surprised us. Maybe there's something in the tank from him. No, I don't believe that he's going to be close to Max. I think he's going to do a better job than Checo, but it's going to take time for him to. I just saw him talking about driving style and so on, and even he's a little weary about how that Red Bull car is going to be. He said, obviously, driving styles in Formula One, he doesn't really believe in it, as these drivers are professionals and they should adapt to whatever car is given to them. But this car is a very particular one that only Max can drive to its full potential. Ricardo was close. Ricardo was very close in that time period, but that was also a very young Max at that time and less experienced. So we'll see with the driver with very little experience how he's going to adapt to a car that's very on the nose and very sensitive.
Well, it might be a benefit of him
I think so.
not having. He's more of a clean slate.
Yes, exactly. Tamo even talks about it a couple of times, and I completely agree with his point, saying that that's why I thought Liam was a smarter decision over Yuki. I know that Yuki might deserve it more to the eyes of the people because of how long he's been in V Carb, but Lawson, to me, was the smarter choice for the team to evaluate, can we truly get another driver that can get close to Max, at least within a tenth or two? They don't want somebody that's going to compete with them, but they want somebody
No.
that's going to be there within a tenth or two. But Liam being who he is, I think he also wants to try and pass Max, which is why I like Liam. But it's going to take a lot for you to get to that guy's level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the main thing is that he doesn't get in Max's way or takes him out.
That's true, yeah.
Which is kind of unfair because when Max was just starting F1, he just did not care about anything. He just did what he did.
But that's why I love him.
Yeah.
And I feel like every Formula One driver should be like Max when it comes to that standpoint. Didn't he just talk about the papaya rules? And he's like, if they told me that over the team radio, I told him piss off and just keep going, which
Yeah.
I love that. Like, that's how everybody should be. In my opinion, that selfishness is what brings you to be a champion. And everybody will look back and be like, no, this guy was king. This is how you should have done it.
Yeah. The problem is that you can be selfish and look after yourself and everything, but then you need to put in the lap times as well, you know?
Yes, yeah.
So like if Stroll and Alonso get into a situation and Stroll says, no, I'm not moving aside. And next lap he's in the wall, then there's not much point in being firm on your decisions.
Agreed. But it's that belief that you have in yourself that Max has over everybody, that he's so confident that he can beat everybody. And every driver has to have that, which I think they do to a certain extent, but it flows out of him. You can see the overconfidence that he has, but he backs it up with his driving.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can fill a whole podcast about Max's.
Yeah, in general, about just drivers and how their confidence is. But Max is definitely the top dog when it comes to that.
Well, he didn't go so well in Baku.
Yeah, probably his worst race of the year.
Race number 17.
Mm-hmm.
Leclerc was on pole, Piastri was P2, and Norris had a very rare Q1 exit. So he started P15, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
But that gave Norris the opportunity to do some papaya rules and hold Perez up, so Piastri could have a safe pit stop.
Which is just insane that they did that, but yeah, I do remember that. That was crazy to me as well. And he ended up doing it. He did do it. He held up Perez for 2 laps or so, and that actually helped Piastri out. But for a guy that's fighting for the championship and ended up getting out in Q1. But I do remember, do you remember how he got out in Q1?
No, I don't.
There was a yellow flag that showed for literally like a second because somebody slowed down on the track somewhere and he lifted in the very last part of that lap, and that threw away his whole lap, and that's why he ended up getting out in Q1. And other drivers were making the argument, I would have just gone through it and finished the lap and took the penalty after the race, but he ended up lifting, and that's why he didn't end up getting through. And there was a debate on should he have lifted or not.
So if he had gone through, then he would have been in Q2 and in Q1, and then after that he would get like a 3 or a 5 place grid drop.
More than likely,
right?
Yeah,
and that would have been better than starting P15.
Yeah,
those are just tiny little details. If he wants to be a champion, that he needs to improve on.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to take this season. If he does it correctly, he'll take what he did bad in this season, learn from that, and put it all into 2025 because that car is going to be good. There is no way that McLaren's just going to drop off a cliff. At least I don't believe so. They haven't shown that in these regulations. And I think he's got to prove a lot of us wrong, because I think we're all in the belief of he didn't show enough to be a champion next year. But he's got it. He's got it if he can take those wrongs and make them into rights.
Well, we'll get to that point later as well, about Lando improving.
Yes.
But so far, we're still in Baku.
Yep.
What else did I write down? There was maybe the move of the season.
Yes.
Okay, you go ahead and tell the people.
Yeah, I mean, for the beginning stint of this race before that pit stop, it was a little boringish for me, but it was always tight between really those top 4. This was Checo's probably best race of the season up until the end. But Piastri and Leclerc were fighting it out. There's a couple of clips of them sliding through that last sector 3 in unison. It looks beautiful.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I really love those clips. And in general, that's what made this Baku GP so good. The overtake that Piastri makes and where he ends up actually braking was a beauty. It was truly a beauty, and his best race this season. He was under control. If Oscar can race like this consistently, he will be better than Lando for sure. This was one of those performances.
Do you think it was Ricciardo that taught him that?
I mean, maybe, because Ricardo was the king of doing moves like that late, but he didn't even lock up or nothing. It was like right on the dot. It was perfect.
And the thing is, the way that turn is, if you overstep the mark, you either need to take the escape route, or you're in the side of the wall.
Yeah.
So no, that was a magical move.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Yeah, and what's funny is it wasn't even in, I think, for Formula One's top 5 overtakes of the year.
Yeah, that's weird.
They put Franco Colapinto over Fernando Alonso. I was like, what? Like, I get it, but I don't get it at the same time. There were much better moves than that.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of advertising involved in that.
Possibly.
What can we do to make the South Americans happy?
Yeah, right.
Okay, put Perez in and put Colapinto in.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay, so Norris and Verstappen, they fight a bit.
Yep.
Leclerc trying to pass Piastri time after time. Some really good defending. And then Russell overtakes Max. Norris overtakes Max. Perez tries to get Leclerc. He gets pipped by Sainz. Sainz goes wide. He's side by side with Perez on a short straight. And yeah, Perez doesn't seem to give him any space here, where there was loads of space. And they touch, and they're in the wall together. So Perez went from maybe getting a P2 to nothing.
Yeah, he could have even possibly gotten a win here. He had desires to go for those last couple laps to go for the win, and it was impressive to say the least. Now, that incident is so weird because they're just going straight, and I think the natural line in Baku is veering off a little bit left to then set up that turn going into that next corner. I think naturally, Perez probably had his wheel like this, and then Carlos wasn't giving anything, and that's how they collided.
Yeah.
But
I think if you have some drivers, they would have kept sort of the track in mind of what you need to do to get the next turn, but also the driver beside you.
Right.
You know, if you have that awareness, because at the end of the day, if he would have moved up 5 or 10 centimeters to the left, then they both could have gone through and both scored a load of points.
True. Yeah.
You know, it's not worth it to be the moral winner without any points.
Agreed.
What else did I write down? Yeah. Piastri won. And then Leclerc and Russell. That was a pretty exciting street race in Baku.
Yeah, in comparison to our 23 and 22 years of Baku, which were very, very boring. That track either gives you like race of the year or worst race of the year. It's one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some classic Baku races in the past.
Lance Stroll podium.
I made a funny race review on one of them once. I think it was a Ricciardo win, so it must have been 2014.
Yeah, I think 2018. 2018, I think, was that one that he ended up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was that crazy race where so many cars ended up crashing. I'm pretty sure that's where he had his double overtake as well. That was a fun race to watch. I think that was with Lance finishing on the podium as well.
Yeah.
And Bottas, who pipped him like right at the end.
Yeah. Well, maybe next season a better Baku race. But now we're going to race number 18, which is Singapore.
Yes.
Now, Singapore was pretty much the Achilles heel of the RB19. But the RB20 was in P2. And Norris put it on pole. Mercedes was driving in an Aston Martin livery.
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought when I just watched the highlights. I was like, huh? Is that Alonso? I was like, oh my god, it's those Mercedes cars with was it
The blue Patronus that they had on, that teal
yeah,
color.
the Patronus color on it, and
Mhm.
it looked exactly like Aston Martin. I
Yeah.
always get these cars modeled up anyway. You know, the Mercedes and the Aston Martin,
Mhm.
because if it's dark on track, the dark green looks kind of black.
It does, yeah. It's my favorite looking car on a dark track, though. I think the Aston looks it looks so good on these tracks that are night tracks when the lights are hitting it correctly. Looks great.
But I can't wait to see the Aston Martin Honda
Me too.
livery.
Me too. Hopefully a little bit of white with it. That'd be cool.
But I hope the shape changes as well, so it's easier to take apart from the Mercedes cars.
Yes, yeah.
Albon had a DNF. Uh, Albon had a really unlucky season.
He did, yeah. It wasn't good, but this was the race that Franco had that crazy dive bomb into turn one, where Alex Albon was definitely pissed on the radio after seeing Franco's move. But Franco's move was great. If you actually
Yeah.
watch it from that top camera, like the helicopter camera, when you see how far he went back, it was ambitious, but it was good.
Yeah. Afterwards, Albon said that it was a little bit over the top the way he reacted.
Yeah.
So it was the heat of the moment.
Right, of course.
But yeah, Albon and Williams, they just could not catch a break in 2024.
No.
And 2025, well, I hope they're a little bit more lucky, but they're not expecting it to be a great season either.
Yeah, they're going to put a lot of hope into 26 for sure.
Yeah. So by lap 30, Norris was already 22 seconds ahead.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd think that would give him sort of peace of mind, you know, to calmly drive himself to the finish. But he almost crashed 3 times. And there were definitely 2 very, very close calls in that.
Yep.
One of the occasions was pretty much like Russell did it the year before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good call, actually.
And Ferrari, yeah, they were pretty much nowhere compared to all the other races. So, do you think that's something typical of these cars as well? That if you have a car that is set up in a certain way or likes certain tracks, then that they're terrible at Singapore?
I think so. I think part of the reason why the RB20 worked better here was that it was better at taking the curbs after they brought a couple of developments, because the car itself in the beginning of the season didn't really have that curb riding, but it was still a very good car, so they didn't really care. But they ended up changing that in the floor philosophy and being able to lift or lower the car when needed on certain tracks. So it was a much better car. I think Max also showed himself like how good he was, because he had a super controlled pace. Now that has a lot to do with nobody really being behind him or in front of him. So he had a lot of clean air to control the race. And that's where he showed. I think a lot of people say that this performance was the reason as to why he won the championship, because this was supposed to be the track that was an Achilles heel for the Red Bull team. He ends up coming out doing this, getting a very easy P2. I think the reason why Lando did almost crash 3 times, this is at least my thought process on it, is he had a point to prove. I think when he's in the lead, he wants to try and win by as much seconds as possible to show off, like, okay, look at how good I am. Like, I'm truly showing off that I can be a champion. I think part of it is pride, and he's just over pushing. He didn't need to do that. You win by 20 seconds, you've showed off how good of a race you had. But when you make a mistake like that a couple times, clearly there's some pressure there that didn't need to be there in the first place.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous thing to do. But yeah, like I said, it's something that he's learning from as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like him having started in the McLaren as poor as it was in, what was it, 2019 and 2020, 2021, 2022, 2020. 2023 at the end it got better,
Right.
and then in 2024 it's pretty much his championship rookie season,
Right. Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Of course. Yeah.
He's getting himself in situations that he didn't think was possible 2 years before or 3 years earlier.
Agreed. Yeah. It's definitely part of it.
So yeah, I think it's all part of the process of becoming a world champion or a top driver.
Mhm.
Well, he's already a top driver.
Yeah. He is a top driver for sure.
Like a proper candidate.
Yes.
So what else did I write down about Singapore? Piastri had a couple of really great overtakes on both Mercedes cars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it always looks amazing in Singapore because it's a night race and there's walls, so
Yeah.
you can see the speed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know drivers rather have proper racing tracks, but you need to see a racing. You need to see a Formula One car going by full speed in real life to see how fast it is.
Absolutely.
And in Zandvoort, I was sitting on a straight, and during practice sessions, you see them just going by slowly. But then if you see them full blast, you're like, it's very hard to make a picture of.
Oh yeah. It's those cars. When I was in Miami, in particular in 2023, when you watch them go through that S sector in Sector 1, the amount of stick, I mean, obviously it's downforce, but the way I would explain it, it's like they're glued to the ground when they're going through that sector at a stupid pace. Looks like a mini rocket ship going through it. So it should always be like that. And maybe it's a controversial opinion, but I truly feel like these 24 races we got this year was pretty much a perfect calendar. We got some night races, some street races. You got pretty much everything. And I feel like part of the season, there might be a boring race or two, but then that just makes you even more excited for the next track that comes up. It's part of the process. Like a great show, all the episodes are good, but some of them are a little less than the others.
Yeah,
I feel this way about it.
It's a bit like a Tarantino movie. It starts off with a really good plot and it's smooth and then all of a sudden you go into like a 20-minute dialogue about some foreign films, and then all of a sudden 7 people get shot at the same time, and then you start building up again for the next big scene.
Right.
And a Formula One season and even a Formula One race, you got to start in the first 3 laps, all kinds of things happen, and then you might have 20 laps where nothing happens until somebody pits, and then everybody starts pitting, and then towards the end, in the last say 15 laps, somebody might crash, and that will cause a chain reaction, and then everything starts happening again.
Oh yeah, that anticipation is what makes Formula One.
Yeah, definitely. And like I've never watched IndyCar, but that number of cars on track and an overtake a minute and all the chaos, I don't think I'd get into that, because I like the subtlety of Formula One.
Agreed. Yeah, I think Formula One's definitely got the overtakes of Formula One. To me are what is most impressive because they don't happen as often as they do in IndyCar. Those cars are super fast in the straight, but then in the corners are not as fast. In Formula One, all these drivers are peak performance. So to actually get the move done, you need to be pretty much perfect. And I think that in itself makes that move so much more impressive than it does in an IndyCar. Now, I can't really comment too much on IndyCar because I haven't watched it properly enough. I've watched a few races here and there. I do find them fun, but not as good as Formula One.
Yeah, definitely. Now, K-Mag, he's going into endurance racing. Is that right?
Yes, yeah,
BMW. But he DNF'd in Singapore. Norris won the race. Max was P2 and Piastri was P3. And this was pretty much a big moment in the championship because everybody was dreading the Singapore race. That triple header was decisive.
Yes.
And I think Max only lost, less than 10 points over those 3 races,
which is incredible. Yeah.
where everybody thought that he was going to lose 36 points. Next race is race number 19, Austin. Norris started on pole, Max started on P2, and Max had a very forceful first turn and took the lead. No, he didn't take the lead. He just forced
Lando
off.
Yeah.
And Leclerc benefited from it.
Mm-hmm.
How many wins do you think Leclerc had thanks to Max? No, it was Piastri and Max that gave him the 2 wins.
Yeah. Yeah, Piastri.
And great driving.
Yeah. I mean, the Ferrari car was crazy good here in Coda. I'm not sure. I still look back to this and I watch a couple of other races that came right after this one, wondering where that performance kind of went in both Vegas and Qatar. Because while there isn't similarities between Coda and Mexico, the car was still really good on both those tracks, and then the performance kind of fell off in those other two. But the car was incredible here. Leclerc was incredible here. So was Sainz. Sainz in that sprint race was like the driver of the year. That sprint race was really incredible to watch him. Those overtakes that he was making, and I feel like Coda, it's one of the best tracks that we have on our calendar because those overtakes can go back and forth throughout that whole sector 3. I think that's really fun, and having the straights where they do have them, having that S sector and sector 1, it's a great track. It's definitely the best American track, and to me, one of the best tracks of the year.
Yeah, it's one track on my list to go to.
Oh, me too. Yeah, I haven't been there yet either.
Austin. It's just I've never been to the States, so my planning was to, just spend a 10-day holiday in Texas.
There's a lot to do there, so yeah.
Just to be in America and go to a race, but it might happen in 2025. Let's see.
Hopefully.
Okay, so there was a moment where Carlos Sainz forces Max off track, and nobody remembers.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
Yeah, it was one of those weird moments where Max got forced off and he rejoined again, and not much was said about it. I just wanted to point it out because if Max does that to somebody else, then it's talked about for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton was in the gravel. He had a DNF, and apparently that was at a point where Russell almost DNF'd as well.
Yeah, in qualifying a couple times, he definitely had to catch his car there. That was the big upgrade that Mercedes brought. The car was very unstable going through that second to last turn in Sector 3. It was there were a couple of these weekends where Lewis just looked completely foreign to Formula One. And this was one of them. It was not just that race. It was the sprint race. It was qualifying. He couldn't get the grips with that car, for sure.
Yeah, it was weird to see.
Very.
And I know he may not be 100% motivated because he knew he was leaving.
Yeah.
But to see him do that at 90% committed, it was still weird.
Agreed.
So Alonso and Liam Lawson had a big fight.
Yeah.
And I think Liam Lawson won that fight because Alonso was later on fighting with Colapinto.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, Aston Martin was still pretty lost.
Yeah, very lost. All the upgrades they were bringing were not working. It was quantity over quality for that team this year. And clearly, they were not making any progress. I do feel like, as an Alonso fan, I still think that he was a bit overboard in that. Liam did nothing wrong there. It was more Alonso getting pissed off at himself for maybe not defending the position as well, because he would have done the same thing that Liam did in that scenario.
Yeah. So Dan Fallows, he's moved into a different position with Newey coming in.
Yep, I just read that he actually ended up moving to road cars today. So it was another announcement that he's not even going to be part of the Formula One team.
Right.
Yeah.
So are they pretty much blaming him for everything then?
It seems like a lot of the blame is going to him. And I just read about that it wasn't actually even much of his ideas that made the AMR 23, the one that was really good in 2023. It was actually some guy called Andy Green who was part of their performance technical directors, and then he was taken off the team last year. He's also doing something, I think, with performance cars. So it's now being said that that was kind of a mistake to take that guy off, and that part of the blame should have been put onto Dan Follows. I'm not really certain. I'm reading more into like what the articles are saying. It's a lot of. I truly believe that they're in a really weird position. Everybody is trying to boast up that Aston should be that next team right now. They still don't have their new simulator. That should be for next year. They'll be better, but I think 26 will be the first time that we actually see them fight for victories because they've been working on the Mercedes simulator. Mercedes has blamed their simulator for so many seasons now that it's been incorrect and the car hasn't been working. And they have some of the best people of all time in that technical department. So it's got to be something going on there. And I think the same thing is corrupting Aston. Then they're also moving from the old factory to the new. There's so many different
Variables.
components to why it's not going how it should. But they're also making mistakes that naturally all the other teams did. But there's a lot of spotlight on them because a lot of money is invested into them.
Mm-hmm.
And people that love Alonso are obviously going to be rageful towards Aston.
And do you think, like in a hands-on sort of pragmatic approach from Nui, do you think he could do something on the drawing board to fix some issues?
Yes, I think that guy is like a magician when it comes to what he's been able to do.
Because his main focus will be the 2026 regulations.
Yes,
and he's coming in a couple of months later. I think he's joining in
March. Yep,
March. But do you think, he says, okay, well, you're dealing with this problem now. Let's go to the drawing board, and I'll give you a direction and try this, and then he'll move on to the 2026 regulations.
Yeah, I believe. I know that they've said they're still going to bring some packages for 2025 because they want to make sure that everything's working correctly. The new simulator will be working for the 25 car towards the middle of the season. They'll be actually using those packages.
Yeah,
and then the 26 car is fully being made in the new wind tunnel and simulator and so on. So that is a big step for them. And I feel like, let's say they come out in 2026 and they fail, that's going to be a big like red flag on that team. So
yeah,
this season, we'll see what happens in 2025. But a lot of people are not really counting the components as to why the team is failing.
No. Okay, well, that was an interesting sidetracking here. Then we had an epic Max versus Lando fight, lap after lap, until Lando overtook off track and got a 5-second penalty, and Leclerc won, and then World War III broke out on social media.
Yep.
Because people said it was unfair that Lando got a penalty in the first place. Then Max fans said everybody gets 10 seconds for overtaking off track. So the penalty was too small. But in the end, it was a net profit for Max again.
I mean, what was your thought process? Let me hear from you, Wimbo. What did you think of the whole Max and Lando fight here in Coda?
Okay, well, I'm not much of regulations and rules. Like I listen to what the experts say, and then I believe it. So if the rule is that if you are in front with your nose at the apex, the turn is yours, and you can take it whatever way you want it, then that's what Max did. And then there is a regulation in place where if you overtake off track, if you gain an advantage off track, you need to give it back, or else you get a penalty. So that part was clear. I always pretty much accept the steward decisions fairly quickly. But I get worked up over the reaction of especially the British media afterwards, because in one situation they can say this is black, and then the exact situation happens, but not for the driver they support, and they say this is black. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Uh,
Yeah.
So, and that frustrates me sometimes, but it also gets me writing new videos.
Of course, yeah. There's always
Because
something.
some of my most popular videos are about these situations.
Right. And you make a very good point on them. I do think that the media themselves, the outcry that they have, I agree. The black and white that they choose between Max or a British driver is definitely apparent. I do believe, though, while Max did the correct decision here on putting his nose in front, because that is part of the rule set, I think the rule set should change, though. I don't think it's fair for him to go that deep in when he can't make the corner. And then obviously Lando will get the penalty because he is using off the track. I wish it was more set in a way that it's opinion based. And sure, that could piss people off, but if it's a certain rule set, then Max can keep doing that. And I think a lot of other drivers will keep doing that.
I think it has changed. I think in the drivers' meetings and everything, they set up a rule where if you're ahead at the apex, you need to at least stay on track to claim the corner.
Mm-hmm.
That happened after that situation.
I did read something about this recently, but I don't think it's changed yet. I think it's something that's being implemented.
Well, don't they have like the driver's notes, or what is it? There's like a set of regulations for each race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have changed the wording in some of that, because we saw heftier penalties for situations like that after the Austin and Mexico race.
True. Actually, good point. Yeah, I do remember seeing heftier penalties. Like the racing that I really like in Formula One is when Leclerc and Hamilton were racing in Qatar, when it's like very close like that. I feel like I would love to see more races like that. I also do like the wheel rubbing. Don't get me wrong. I like a little bit of aggression there too. But it's incidents like this where I'm like, I mean, Max is right, but also like Lando was kind of right too. It's like I hate how that rule set is set up to where he's penalized, even though Max did the right thing. But what else could have Lando done there? Like it's one of those.
What Lando should have done was slot in right behind Max again and try again, because he was faster.
Agreed. And he should have overtaken him like 3 or 4 times, but Max did an amazing job defending. That was the difference maker.
Like, I think it was Hungary where Max was forced off the track and he gained a position on Norris. And GP had to really talk to Max to make sure that position was given back.
Right.
It's in the rules. I just said I don't know about the rules, but I think it's Article 33.5 or something, where a driver is not allowed to go off track and gain a lasting advantage. And I know this because I did a video about Bahrain 2021, comparing it to Abu Dhabi 2021. In Bahrain 2021, Lewis Hamilton gained an advantage for 29 laps by going off track a little bit and going back on, gaining a couple of tenths. And then by the time the race director found out, everybody was told that wasn't allowed anymore.
Right.
But the consequence was that Max had to overtake Lewis Hamilton again, and that went wrong. And that's why Max lost the race. And it cost him 7 points. Right? And then in Abu Dhabi, the race director made another decision that may have cost Lewis Hamilton 7 points. So it balanced it out.
Yeah, there's definitely a debate for that.
So that was the video I made when I was a bit of a rookie still, but it's a pretty interesting video.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had the regulations written out on, how you can do a paper background in your
Mhm.
in your editing software. So it looked pretty good. I watched it the other day. I think it's a video I watch every 12th of December. But anyway, where were we? Austin.
Yes, this was just
Yeah, Leclerc won the race.
yeah. Leclerc was
And
super impressive here.
and who else was on the podium?
I think it was Leclerc, Sainz, and then Max.
Yeah, Max was
Yeah,
P3.
Max
That's
finished
right.
on the podium because of the 5-second penalty that Lando got.
Yeah.
Barely though, barely. It was like 7 or 8 tenths. But I, another thing that I want to mention with this though, a lot is talked about the penalty and in the time it was mentioned, but Max's defending here was phenomenal. It was
Yeah.
genuinely phenomenal. He was by far the slower car, and Lando just struggled to get past him. It was very, very well done.
He just
Continuously.
kept positioning that car,
Perfectly.
thinking about the next turn, and even if Norris got a nose ahead of him, then the next turn was the other direction again, and Max was ahead again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was frustrating, but I think Norris learned the lesson because the race after that was Mexico, race number 20. Max and Carlos Sainz went into turn one fighting, and then Sainz went off track. But he gave the place back before he got a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an accident. Yuki Tsunoda and Albon? No.
I think it was between Yuki. Funny enough, Pierre was part of this incident but didn't get clipped. So
Yeah.
he was lucky here. But he was kind of the one that pushed Albon more to the left. And then that kind of went with Albon pushing now Yuki more to the left. And then you get that crazy shot of the cameraman getting Yuki right there. That was crazy.
Yeah, it was a great shot.
Yeah, it was a beautiful shot. I got to give the cameraman respect for not moving when the car is that close.
So, so there was a restart, and for some reason, Sainz was way, way quicker than Max, and just passed him like that.
That was a beautiful move, though. That was a beautiful. Yeah, he caught Max off guard, which nobody does. He caught Max completely off guard.
It was very precise,
Yes.
and yeah. In those situations, I think Sainz is a little underrated.
Agreed.
So what do you think? What is Sainz's weakness then? I don't think he ever finished higher than P5 in the overall standings, and there must be something why he isn't rated as Leclerc is rated or Russell is rated.
I think if you ask me, Leclerc is the quicker driver on a track-to-track basis. And he's not as consistent as Carlos, but he's quicker. And I think that ends up accumulating throughout the season. While Carlos does finish P5 or 6 most races, Leclerc could then finish in those P5 or 6 races P2 or P1. And I think throughout a season, Carlos is just missing a couple of those tracks throughout the year. And typically Mexico is not a good one for him. Typically it's one where you can see his weaknesses of that driving style that he has doesn't work there. But this year he was phenomenal. So he's improving on those tracks, but I think it's a track-to-track thing. He doesn't have the same raw pace that Leclerc has, but his mindset and his IQ while driving is one of the highest on the grid, and I think that saves him for a lot of races.
Yeah. It's a pity that he's wasting away at Williams next season. Then.
It is a big pity. I'm very pissed off with that, honestly. I would have loved to have seen this was my favorite driver pairing on the grid. I thought Carlos and Charles, I love them both, how they are as a personality. I think they get along so well together. I also like when they fight because you can tell that both of them want to win, but they also respect each other. And I think that's something that we don't typically get. So
yeah, they get cross with each other, but not for very long.
Yeah.
It's a proper relationship.
Agreed. Yeah, it's how a racing relationship when you're in competition with somebody should be. Now, we've never really seen these guys truly fight for a title, and I think that's where Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton situations are going to pop up again. But I love the guys, and I'm sad that he's going to be in Williams. I really hope that they can improve that car and he gets back somewhere to podiums and winning races.
But yeah, we've been talking. We We want Aston Martin to do well and start winning races in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
We want Williams to do well and start winning races in 2026. We're pretty sure that Ferrari and Mercedes are going to be up there.
Yep.
Red Bull with the new powertrains,
That's cool.
it's a big unknown,
Yeah.
but there's a big possibility that they're up there as well.
Agreed.
Are we going to have a season where 10 teams are going to win races?
I would be in love with that. But if I'm being honest, my friend, I think that 2026 is probably going to be a blowout for one team because it's engine regulation, and it's going to start that way, and then it's going to become a lot better. That's my thought process. But I hope I'm completely wrong.
But Aston Martin with Adrian Newey, isn't Adrian Newey very good at moving aerodynamics? What do you call it? The new overtake system is.
Oh, okay, yeah, active aero, yeah,
active aero. I'm sorry, I'm from Holland.
No, you're good, man. I mean, like, but that is like he's one that pretty much invented that. So at Williams before, he is a mastermind when it comes to anything aerodynamics. But I'm not sure how much can be really messed around with on those active aerodynamics when it's mode Z or mode X. I can't exactly remember.
No,
but he will be a big contributing factor. I still think, and Honda's a great engine manufacturer, as we've seen now with Red Bull. They've definitely brought up their reputation back up since the McLaren days. Well, since the more recent McLaren days. I mean, the previous McLaren days, they were also the best at that time, too. So it'll be interesting between Mercedes. I still wouldn't count out Red Bull because they're a very experienced team. It's going to be a very, very interesting 9 days of testing before we go into that first race in Bahrain or whatever, Australia. We'll have to see what it is.
Well, first things first, 2025 first, and we're doing a recap for 2024.
Yes.
Where was I? We were in Mexico, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We just had to overtake with Carlos Sainz, so this is where the race gets more spicy.
Yes. Sainz overtook Max, and Norris was right on the tail of Carlos Sainz and did a very ballsy overtake down the inside using the regulations that Max was abusing the race before.
Mm-hmm.
And Norris came out on top. He cut over the grass, so it looked really weird. And then Max thought, "Well, fuck this. I'm not gonna let him in front." So he done one of the weirdest moves ever, and just overtook him, and they both went off track and stayed in front of him for the next 27 laps. Giving Carlos Sainz his fourth win, and Max had then a little bit of a net profit of not giving Lando a 12-point closing the gap by 12 points, but closing the gap by less because Norris winning would have been the worst case.
Yeah, actually,
scenario.
In hindsight, somehow that Max move that he made actually ended up working out for him. It was a very bad race for Red Bull. They were really slow. There's actually a statistic that the Haas car at some point was quicker than the Red Bull in Mexico, which is just insane. But definitely a ballsy move, a very deserved penalty. But I mean, yet again, I know a lot of people talk about it. I think that mindset is what gets him to win. And K-Mag talks about it later in the race. I think even Leclerc talks about it, and they say, I would do the same move. They say, and yes, it's a scary move. Yes, it could have been a big incident, but these are Formula One drivers. Anything can be a scary incident. And in those situations, when the moment's tense, and clearly Max could realize that the championship, it could fall apart here if everything goes wrong. So he still did what he did. As I said, Leclerc, both K-Mag, there's probably other drivers that would have done that same exact move. There are reasons for what he did. Was it fair? No, but he was also penalized for it. So at the end of the day, I guess it ended up being justified for Mexico.
Yeah. So Max got a 20-second penalty. He even had to turn off the car. Do you know why they do that?
I think He turned off the car?
Yeah, he just, GP said, okay, turn off the car, Max. And he just sat there with his arms. He said, yeah, I could have a gin and tonic.
I don't know if he
But
turned it off, but I think he just kept it in like neutral or whatever because he doesn't want to accidentally like hit the gas and then get off the pit.
we'll need to look that up.
Okay.
Maybe somebody in the comments will know better.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was interesting. And then it was Alonso's 400th race.
Yeah, he's also third DNF in these
Yeah.
big races. So 400 DNF, 300 DNF, 200 DNF.
Now, do you know all these things? Just you've got all that stored up here.
Yeah, I just have a great memory.
Because I watched all these highlights today, and then I wrote down the notes, and I've probably forgotten half of the stuff tomorrow already. But no, that's impressive that you know all these things just from the top of your mind.
A lot of research. It takes a lot of time, but yeah.
Yeah. So Liam and Checo were fighting, and Checo was very angry over the radio. There was something already brewing there with,
those two.
Yeah, with Checo losing his seat to Liam Lawson. That must have been discussed already because those two were so feisty against each other.
Oh yeah.
Because Liam Lawson and Colapinto made contact, and Perez saw it on the billboard, and he goes, "What's that idiot doing?" And then there is Brad Bird. No, what's his name?
Sam Bird.
Sam Bird.
Yeah.
Said, no, is his name not Hugh? Hugh Bird.
Maybe.
We'll look it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said, yeah, you can watch the highlights later.
Yeah. I do remember this. I mean, I'm sad that he's not in our sport anymore. Is it deserved? Yes. I think that Checo definitely, the way that he was driving as of lately, did not deserve a seat. But it's going to be sad to not see him in the sport anymore. But what was more sad was that he was actually fighting with Liam in a much slower car. So he kept getting into those positions. And I think that was, like, you shouldn't be fighting with Liam. You should have been able to overtake him on the straight like it was no problem. But I think this Kiwi driver is going to be very feisty in this Red Bull season. I know he's probably happy with getting the seat, but if that mindset comes out like he's been showing so far, he's a feisty driver. He's got that same attitude like Max, and I like him a lot for that because I think that's what it takes to be up at the top with these guys.
Yeah, well, let's hope he has the skill as well to back it up.
Agreed. Yeah, because he even flipped the bird to Checo down the straight. he did everything in his power to piss off Checo.
Yeah. Okay, so the next race 21, is Sao Paulo.
Yes.
Brazil. And I didn't write down any notes because, that's a race I remember from the heart.
Of course.
It started with qualifying where Max had the pace. But for some reason, all the red flags where he was safe, they lasted about 2 seconds. And the red flag that made him get kicked out of Q1, or was it Q2?
Q2, I think, yeah.
Q2, yeah. That one took about 45 seconds. And it was, of course, Lance Stroll that destroyed his car and still tried to back it up. And so I've never seen Max so angry since... Brazil 2018.
Oh, right.
God, he was so pissed off. And then, there was a grid drop as well. Those Honda engines are not the most durable then compared to the Mercedes engines.
I mean, it's funny, though, because they were pretty much perfect. But now that it's became a little bit more competitive, it seems like maybe they've tuned up something. Maybe they needed to go full pace now, and maybe they weren't doing that last year. And that's where the problems have started to rise now. So... Mercedes has always had the most reliable engines, but Honda, as of lately, has had the best, most consistent engine, I would say.
Yeah.
So, but Ferrari is really fast too, but they're also unreliable. It seems like if you want the best engine, Honda is probably the number one. Ferrari's probably got the quickest car with the engine, but a little less unreliable. And then the most reliable is Mercedes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Max was he was just really, really pissed off, and you don't want to have a Max pissed off because that brings out the best in him.
Right.
And it started raining, which was fortunate. So he started from P17. Lando Norris, his competitor, started in P1. And then Max was P10 after two turns.
Right.
And yeah, he just kept finding grip. And yeah, it's the same old story with Max in the rain.
Yes, the best driver in the rain by far.
Yeah. And yeah, he kept finding that spot where he needed to overtake people. And before we knew it, he was P5, P6. And then George Russell and Lando Norris, they pitted during a virtual safety car, which just ended when they went in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they had the full benefit of it.
Yeah.
I think the cars were driving fast again by the time they came out. And yeah, Ocon and Max in front, they held on to their old intermediate tires, and they waited and waited, and they were yelling for red flag, but that didn't happen until Colapinto crashed.
Yeah, a very unnecessary crash, but that was a big bill.
I thought that Colapinto was crying over the radio, like, oh my god, I'm going to get killed because I can't drive these tires anymore. And Williams didn't want to pit him, and that's why he crashed. Weeks later, I found out that Williams had pitted him and that Colapinto was trying to catch up with the safety car when he crashed.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't even know that.
A lot of people missed that.
Huh.
He was driving too fast on cold tires to catch up with the safety car in the group again. And that's when he crashed. And that's when the red flag was called.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave Max, fresh tires without it costing him any time.
Yeah.
And then Max was happy enough with P2 until Sainz crashed. And then after that stoppage, he made a move on Ocon and he was ahead. And then he finished the race 20 seconds ahead of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And Lando Norris, I don't know if the car was set up more for dry conditions, because they were really fast in the sprint race and qualifying. But in the rain, he was nowhere. He went off track twice.
Yeah, I think that was more to do with confidence in the rain, because I think they still had if, let's say, Max and Lando were right next to each other, and let's say the confidence was there, I think they'd have pretty much the same pace. The car was... There were no difference between those cars. Red Bull had a much better car this weekend, but Max was unstoppable. Like, if Ocon and Gasly can be just as fast as him in some points in the race, so can that McLaren. But it had more to do with Lando was afraid to go for the overtakes while Max wasn't. He had the confidence to overtake over 10 to 11 cars without even the whole incident with the pit stops and the safety car and the red flag. He overtook 11 cars. Then he got also Ocon on the restart, where Lando ended up going off on the restart. And it was just a show of a true champion. This was his most impressive drive of his career, in my opinion. Is there some luck involved? Yes, because he ended up... But that also takes brains, though, because you had to end up staying out. You had to make a decision that a lot of people weren't willing to make. George wanted to make that decision, but Mercedes pit him anyways. So George was he had the right mindset, but they still ended up pitting him. The Alpines really benefited from it. Yet again, it's luck, but also not luck, because he chose the decision. Then he ended up staying out in those very tricky conditions. He was smart enough to not go after Ocon, who was driving like a madman in those insane conditions, but props to him too. It was a class act by Max.
That race saved the whole Alpine season.
Yeah, it got him to P6.
34 points or something.
Unreal, because they were definitely not deserving of that. But even as somebody I'm not the biggest Alpine fan, I was happy for them though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I like all teams pretty much.
Me too.
And now that Alpine has been so bad, and they start getting more credit from me because they deserve it. And when Mercedes was winning the constructors 7-8 years in a row, then they lose all the credit because you want to see another team win. I didn't have any problem with McLaren winning the constructors either.
Me neither.
So, okay, back to Brazil. No, it was a masterclass.
It was, yeah.
And but we'll be talking about it a lot more in the coming years.
Absolutely, yeah. That'll be something that'll be throughout his career will be recognized as one of his best drives.
The Netflix show in 2045 will be there will be a whole episode dedicated to this.
Oh yeah.
Las Vegas is the 22nd race of the season. Russell started P1, and Max and Norris started P5 and P6, and they were doing the title decider race because Max needed to stay ahead of Norris to get the title. That race had a lot of Ferrari drama because Leclerc overcooked his tires.
Yes.
And Sainz overtook him, but then Sainz had to give the position back later. I'm not sure why that was. And then Sainz got called in, and then it was more like a situation of like in, out. So he got it over the line. But yeah, go ahead and tell me what happened at Ferrari.
Yeah, so it was at first, like in the beginning of the race, Leclerc tried going for an overtake on George, even though he didn't have the faster car. He ended up overcooking his tires at that point. Carlos gets ahead of him. And then by the time they were going for their second pit stop, because it was a 2 pit stop race, it was actually Sainz that overcooked his tires a bit, and Lewis was catching him. But Leclerc was in front defending Lewis for a couple of laps, and they told him, let's change positions so Leclerc can benefit off of the tires that he still has, and then Carlos, you come in. So he does that. He changes the position. And as he's going in, that's where the in, out situation happens. He cuts the line, and he never ended up getting a penalty for this, which I found crazy. But he cuts the line, and that completely screws his race. Completely, because he was the faster driver over Leclerc in this race. And now he's behind by like 5 or 6 seconds, but they end up pitting him the next lap. That was the key point. They pit Carlos the next lap. They keep Leclerc out for another 2 laps. And then when they're coming out of the pit lane, but when Leclerc is coming out of the pit lane, Carlos passes him because Leclerc is on the cold tires. And that's where the drama erupts. That's where Leclerc said something funny about, I think it was like, we
asked him to stay behind you.
Yeah. And then he's like, tell him in Spanish. That was a good line by Leclerc, I gotta say. That had me laughing.
Did you hear Leclerc's radio after the race?
Oh yeah. I made a whole video about this because I thought it was such a good thing.
I think he said the F word 10 times.
Yeah.
He was really, really cross, which is kind of nice to see as well because Leclerc is always such a nice guy.
Yeah, but he's got that. Yet again, another one of those drivers that I believe has that mentality to be a champion. He's super ultra competitive, and he cares a lot about every single race, and he doesn't want to lose to Carlos. Same as Carlos. No. So Ferrari telling Carlos to stay behind Leclerc was such a stupid thing to say in my opinion, because they screwed him a couple of laps before, and then they're expecting him to stay behind. Even though that was the last podium position. Carlos doesn't owe anything to Charles, but same for Charles. So it was definitely Carlos's way. Go for it. He went for it. And Leclerc was rightfully mad because the team screwed both of them over. There was no point in pitting them 2 laps later. It's a mess. But it was a very rare mistake in comparison to what we've seen from Ferrari, especially in 2022.
Yeah, that was my next question. Do you think Ferrari will ever get rid of that clown show strategy reputation?
I think that they have done a great job this year. In comparison to years before, I think Frederick Vasseur is very much changing that mindset. They changed the guy that was the engineer for Leclerc, who I thought wasn't doing a good job. They changed the strategy team as well. It's clear that they've done much better. They had a couple of goofball mistakes, like this. Vegas was definitely the biggest one. I can't remember any of the other races but there were a couple
Well,
more.
we didn't see them on slicks in the rain or vice versa this season.
Right. There was one moment in Silverstone, now that you bring that up, that like
Oh,
Leclerc went for that, like it was a gamble. He went for a gamble there. But I think in general, a lot of praise should be given to Ferrari, especially in Frederick Vasseur's way.
right.
Yeah, he's done a good job. Well, what do you think?
Okay.
Do you think that they've obviously developed a lot better from the previous seasons?
Well, they made some extremely weird calls in the years before, so it wasn't hard to do it a little bit better.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, like those two drivers were pretty hard to manage because they're both dominant drivers.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely haven't made it easier on themselves next season.
No.
You have one driver like Lewis Hamilton who doesn't like making his own strategy. He'd rather get told a strategy and then complain about it afterwards. And then there's Charles Leclerc. I think both of them rely on the strategy of their team a lot. So yeah, there's a lot depending on the strategy team next season.
Yeah, I mean, rightfully so. You have a lot of belief and trust in those people, so to keep that belief and trust, I think, is important if you rely on them to make those decisions. Now, a lot of people can look at Red Bull and see how good they do because by far they are the most consistent team on a track to track basis, on a year to year basis. That is the best team strategy wise, pit stop wise. The crew in general seems like they just get along. They haven't really dismembered at all since they've been this dominant team, with the
Yeah.
exception of a couple of okay, Adrian Newey's left, but I'm more so talking about the pit stop crew and the people that are in that garage. Those guys stay. They never move.
Yeah.
And it has to be with that environment. That environment just seems to be very friendly towards the people working there. Now, while it might not be very friendly for the second driver, everything else is pretty much perfect at Red Bull.
Yeah. Well, what I always like is that there's a race going on, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, Max gets called into the pits. Are they going for a two-stopper? Like an unexpected two-stopper. And you know that when Red Bull does it, you know it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Very true. Very true.
And that makes it even more exciting if you compare it to, Kevin Magnussen is in after 13 laps.
Right.
Yeah, they're trying something different.
Right. Yeah. True.
Yeah. Okay, where were we? Were we still in Las Vegas?
I mean, with Vegas, yeah. I mean, pretty much.
Yeah.
If we're talking about it, George Russell ended up having a killer victory. Lewis Hamilton had his comeback from P10 to P2, which was impressive, but he never really was going to catch Russell.
Well, I've written down one thing. Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc all passed Verstappen without a fight.
Yeah.
So what we saw in Las Vegas, that's how the British media wants to see Max. Just like this. Like, oh.
Right.
That's how they want him. They even complimented on him. Yeah, he's not taking this fight. He's only thinking about the championship.
Which was smart. It was smart.
Yeah.
There was no need for a fight.
No, you definitely don't want to put up a hard defense and then, oops, two wheels touch and you get a puncture.
Right, exactly.
Because you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself on the next races then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was Russell, Hamilton, and Sainz. So another 1-2 for Mercedes.
Yeah.
Qatar, race 23. We're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
Max was leading after turn 1, and it was justice for the theater that George Russell had made, because Max had driven a wonderful pole time, and because of that weird, what was it, warm up lap
Stupid
impeding,
penalty. Yeah, stupid
he
penalty.
got a 1-place penalty.
Yeah.
Something I've never seen in my whole life.
Yeah.
And that was entertaining because all hell broke loose again.
Right.
First, Max in all the press conferences, and then a week later, Russell set up some separate press conferences, and he just, oh my god, he just went on and on and on. He almost brought up World War II. Well, it all started when Germany invaded Poland.
yeah, he was definitely on a tangent there.
Yeah, but so over the top. Like, is there anybody that really appreciated it? Like, did he gain any respect? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I don't think it was the right way to go about it. I think if I'm looking at it from a very neutral perspective, I think that it could have been handled behind closed doors for both of them. But it's there's an argument made for both drivers. I think the penalty was really stupid and should never have been. If the FIA director comes in and doesn't give that penalty, nothing happens.
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing to me. It's that the mistake was made by giving the penalty. Now,
yeah.
George, as a driver, has the right to try and fight it and try to get him that penalty. Whether it's right or not, that's just up to him. And Max, of course, is going to be offended by that. He's going through all these, really going through this to get him that penalty, which is non-deserved in the first place. But it's that the FIA director is entertaining the situation. To me, that's stupid, bro. You should just told him this is not a penalty. We'll talk about this another day, man. But that's what started the whole thing.
Yeah, it's just Max has been in the stewards room an awful lot of times, and he's been in there with Lewis Hamilton as well. And I think Lewis Hamilton, who I have more respect for now, thanks to George Russell.
Yeah.
I think Lewis Hamilton in the stewards room is more like, hey man, I just tried to do this, and he tried to do that, and the move that he made wasn't on, so I think he deserves a penalty, and he leaves it at that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But George Russell's like, oh, it was so dangerous, and he did it on purpose, and he did this, and he did that, and it's not the first time, and just building up and building it up like fucking Matlock in a courtroom, and then coming out of the courtroom, you're slapping somebody's shoulder again and being all pally. That two-faced behavior that doesn't sit well with people like Max.
Yeah.
Like you can start a war and you call somebody a dickhead before you go into the stewards room and inside of the stewards room, and not being all pally outside of it, and then inside you switch.
Agreed. Yeah, I agreed. That's definitely he made his he's very PR trained. I think the Mercedes team in general loves to go on the route of they appeal to the media. And I've never been a fan of that because I always thought if you look back, and I know we're not talking about him right now, but if you look back at Lewis Hamilton and McLaren, how he used to talk to the media and how he was as a personality to now, it's completely different. And I know why he changed, and it made sense as to why he changed, but it's never sat with me very well. I like when a driver is very outspoken and honest in the way that they speak, like what their actual opinion is. I'm not trying to hear what's the majority opinion. I'm trying to hear what you really think. And I think Alonso is like that. I think Max is like that. I think even Leclerc and Carlos are like that. Like most drivers, I feel like are like that. George says things to appeal to everybody. Lewis says things to appeal to everybody. Lando's pretty outspoken. I know a lot of people don't like him for that, but I actually respect that Lando says whatever's on his mind too. So
yeah,
it goes both ways, and I don't think George should be doing that. If you're gonna be the way that you are, show it off to everybody, bro. Like, then nobody's gonna. You might get less fans, but you'll also be yourself. So,
but I think after this whole ordeal, Max is gonna stay the same. He's not going to change his driving. He's not going to change
no, of course
the way
not.
he talks. But Russell the next situation when he's in that steward's room, he might think, shall I put up another show like I did then or not? And, public opinion, if he does something like this again and it comes out in the media, then he'll get that stamp of a two-faced, yeah. You know what I mean? It'll enhance his reputation, and I don't think he wants that.
I think I don't know. I don't know if I think that way, Wimbo. I actually think that now I think Max is gonna draw out a different person out of him. I think he's gonna be more honest now. I think it's gonna be more of no Two Face. He's gonna be now more
Russell.
Yeah, more Russell. And I think that like in both a good and a bad way. Some people might not like that. Some people might like it. But I think we're gonna see more of a side of if he believes something is a penalty, he'll tell everybody about it. It's not going to be buddy and then go to the steward's room. I think it's going to be more who he is.
Yeah. So, but overall, that's a positive change.
Yes, I agree. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, back to the race. There was a three-way crash in the back, and Stroll bumped into Albon, and he got a 10-second penalty for it.
Oh yeah, the understeer moment.
Hamilton had a false start, which also shows that he's not completely sharp. Race 23 in a team he's leaving. K-Mac and Yuki, they have a big fight, which was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden there was a mirror on the track.
Oh yeah.
Verstappen lifted, but Norris didn't. And then Bottas smashed the mirror into pieces, and then all of a sudden we had two punctures. Now, I think I heard you say that the punctures may not have been due to the debris.
I'm not exactly sure. I thought it wasn't, but I think when I looked back a week later that it was partially from the debris, but I didn't see them go over it though.
No.
Everybody was making the argument that because we didn't get a yellow flag till we got the punctures. That was the funny part of like the mirror. It was just up there. And I know that a lot of people were like right on, okay, the mirror, so that's why the punctures must happen. But Qatar is known for punctures because of how the track is and taking those high-speed corners consistently. But because they happen so closely together, it's very possible that it was the debris. So I can't say for certain that it was because of the debris or not. But I can say for certain that the FIA definitely made a big mistake here.
Yeah. So, but Max lifted and he checked his mirror straight away, and he thought, hey, Norris came a lot closer. So he went over the radio and asked if Norris had lifted, and he hadn't. And then Norris got a 10-second stop and go penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought that was way too heavy. And then as it turned out, there were 2 or 3 situations in the hybrid era where drivers hadn't lifted for double weight yellows and also got a 10-second stop and go penalty. And Max won his 9th race, Leclerc P2 and Piastri P3.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything from Qatar that stood out to you?
I think I got my favorite radio of the season with Kevin Magnussen when he passed by Alex Albon. That was one of those moments where he told him to fuck off. I thought that was I thought that was hilarious. I love K-Mac, and that was a great thing. The way that he said it was so funny. But other than that, Leclerc stood out to me because that Ferrari was not quick enough for P2, but a super impressive race. This was one of those races where I thought Piastri would be higher up, but I know he finished P3, but it was a very inconsistent race for him. He oversteered a lot in that last corner and never really had the pace to catch up to Lando. I do think the stop and go penalty, while you do bring up the incidents, I think it shouldn't be that. Like I said, it's so situational for me, like these penalties. Because yes, he didn't lift, but then to stop and go 10 seconds that late into the race screws up his whole race completely. I don't know. It's very situational for me. But
I heard people say that the crime he committed was in, I don't know, lap 20.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave him the penalty in lap 37. Like 17 laps later. If he had to stop and go, say, a lap after he did he made the mistake,
Mm-hmm.
then he would have still been in the top 6.
True.
But because the race was so much later, it gave him less time. So there's definitely something to be said for quicker rulings as well.
Absolutely. And another point that I forgot to mention was I think it was it Mexico or Vegas? It was either Mexico or Vegas. We got a new race director. We went from those 3 to that
Oh,
one dude. Yeah, and that's why I actually liked some of the decisions he was making quickly in the race before in Vegas, but then here it was very weird. Like Qatar was very, very weird. First with the
yeah.
Max thing, and then with this mirror. But I thought he was doing an okay job up until Qatar. But then he did better in Abu Dhabi, to be fair. But it was still very new for him, and clearly he got caught out by a very dramatized race.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we can fill a whole podcast with talking about the FIA as well.
Of course.
Let's not.
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi 24. 2 McLarens in front. Max Verstappen tried an ambitious move, but Piastri hadn't seen him. Max tried to prevent it by going over the curb, but slid into Piastri. And they both had a wonderful spin, and Max just, well, he only lost a couple of places.
I know. I can't believe he caught that car. That was crazy.
It looked really cool.
Yeah, it did look cool.
But anyway, he got a 10-second penalty. Piastri said, yeah, definitely the move of a world champion. And then he drove into the back of Colapinto. And his reaction afterwards was the best. He said, yeah, next time I'll just think before I say something like that, because I got caught out myself.
Yeah.
Max made up immediately after that incident. But it was good for the race because it brought Ferrari back in contention.
Mm-hmm.
And it made the race relatively interesting.
Yeah, very interesting for Abu Dhabi. This race for me is typically a nap. I'm not a fan of this race typically.
So Leclerc fought back to P3 or P2.
Yeah, I think he got up to
P3. It was definitely P2 and P3 for Sainz and Leclerc.
Yeah, P3 for Leclerc. He made up like, what was it, like 11 places in lap 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was insane.
And we saw Checo Perez's last
unfortunately
action on track, which was a spin. Verstappen and Leclerc, they had to work up the field again, which was interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it finished with a dominant win for McLaren, or for Norris, and the McLaren wins the constructors since 1998 was the last time they won it.
It's been a while. It's been a long time. Yeah. So very impressive drive by him. It was
definitely. Yeah. He did not set a foot wrong.
Yes, this was a very, very good drive and arguably his best drive of the season. Zandvoort's up there too, but not a foot wrong. He had a lot of pressure riding on him, especially with that pit stop and everything, and the drivers coming close. But this was, if he can continue like this into 2025, he'll be a scary opponent.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's all the 24 races.
Yeah, that's a very, 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 very interesting 2024 season.
Yeah, and it was lovely to have this 2-part recap with you.
Absolutely, my friend.
And we definitely need to stay in contact. We need to do more of these things.
Of course, we will.
Right, everybody. So we're just saying goodbye from here.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a while before we start testing, but I'm sure we'll make some content before testing is there.
Of course.
So everybody have a lovely holidays, lovely Christmas. I don't know when this video is going to be out, but I'll see you all the next time.
See you guys. Oh my God. See you guys.